Hey, how's it going? My name's Kent and I'm a drummer. I've spent the last several months of my life working on an album in this room, and today I want to share with you one of the Ableton sessions and talk about how I made it. And I want to take you through some of the issues that I had while writing and recording this and how that kind of differentiated from my other songs. This is the third track on the album. It's called How the Story Goes. Got some really cool production stuff. There's a lot of synths and sort of electronic drum parts going on. This is probably the most like electronic or the most kind of produced song on the album too, so it should be a fun one to sort of dive into. I think the production of this song really makes it what it is. I want to first of all talk about the kind of how and why I wrote this. Back in summer of 2024, I was doing some local crew work. I was working at a gig that Nothing But Thieves were playing. I remember thinking afterwards, man, how do you write a song that has all these synthy elements and like make it kind of like a pop song, but it's still really like kind of dark and heavy-ish? How do you do that? How do you like capture that? There's so many ways that you can start writing a song. With this one, it was a very intentional, I'm gonna sit down and try and write in the style of Nothing But Thieves and kind of see what happens. It's funny because every single time that, and I've done this a lot, every single time that I've tried this where I try and mimic like an artist and write a song in their style or whatever, every time that happens, the song never actually ends up sounding like the band. Like, obviously, you know, because I'm not in Nothing But Thieves. When I was writing this, I had no intention of putting this on the album. To be honest, I think every single song on this album, bar like 2 or 3, have at some point I've questioned, like, should this be on here? Is this good enough? You know, is this too much of one style or another? Most of the songs in this album too weren't written for the sake of being on an album. It was kind of just like the folder of pop punk music just kind of got bigger and bigger, and then I was like, you know what, man, I can make an album out of this, let's do it. Because I had no intention of making this into anything or releasing this song when I first wrote it, I wanted to just let it be itself, and I think that's some of the best stuff I've written is when I've allowed the music in the song to breathe and become its own thing, be itself, rather than trying to make it what I want it to be. Really happy with how this turned out in the end because I let it be its own thing. There's a lot of variation in the sections between the first verse and the second verse, for example. Things kind of change. Yeah, let's jump into this and let's talk about the drums. First thing I want to talk about is all the MIDI that's going on here. The drums all initially when I wrote this would have been MIDI because that's kind of how I write drums for the most part, because it's just a quicker way of getting the ideas out, especially if I can't record this because it's really late at night or whatever. For some reason, when I went to actually play this on the kit, things just weren't working, partially because of like the triggering on it and the way that works, and the sound I wanted was different than live drums. So that's why we've got all of these 909s and stuff going on here. So I didn't really want to use like standard 808s on this because I wanted it to have, just wanted it to have a slightly more unique sound. So I've got this kit here, sounds like this. Nothing crazy going on here, just a bit of EQ, reverb, compression. I wanted the intro of the song to have this very small feeling because the smaller you start, the bigger you can get. There's a sort of build before the first chorus. I wanted that to be really big and really hit hard. That was another reason why I chose to sort of take everything down in this section. They're the only drums happening at the start. And that's something that I'm a big fan of too, like having elements become the focal point in certain points of the song. So like at the start here, we want to be listening to the electronic drums. So that's the bit I was talking about. I wanted that to be really big. And then you've got all this space here to let the synth melody be introduced, and then you're kind of focusing on that instead, and then the bass lines there kind of keeping things going. Build it up here. Again, really hammering home that melody, the synth. And the E kit comes in. It's just playing kick. But that wasn't enough. So we've still got claps going on the 909 here. And then this, still just going. Like, you would not believe the amount of iterations that this single bar of music has gone through. I wanted there to be space between this build-up and the chorus, but it was really hard finding what was the right thing to do here. Do I put a big fill? Like, I'm sure there was a big drum fill here at some point. This synth got taken in and out so many times. A little bit here. You've got a lot of tension kind of building up here. It's kind of dancey, but it's like you just want to actually be able to release that tension, and I think the chorus does that pretty well. And then that melody gets kind of brought back in here too. I want to talk about the drum sound now and how I actually recorded that. This is the chorus. There's a few little like cheeky toms there. There's probably one around here too. But that boom. Oh, I just love little cheeky like embellishments like that. Is some of my favorite stuff to do on the drums. I recorded this directly from a stereo out of my Roland TD9 drum kit going into channel 1 and 2 in my interface. I've got some of these as mono, some of these as stereo, just for trying to replicate an acoustic drum kit the best I could, because the sounds in this are great, but in terms of mixing it with an actual full song, you've got way less control over like the individual drums and what close mics would do when you only have a stereo. I've got a kick channel here, just going to run through all this, which is just running through some kind of low passes and a gate and a compressor to basically just kind of be a sub, because a lot of the kick gets picked up in other things. And then we've got a snare for the gate here too. It's also just a mono track, but and again, it's just saturated and gated and compressed and EQ'd a bit to give you more attack on the snare. This is more of that kind of snare body room sound kind of thing. Yeah, getting that like kind of 200 hertz like snare beef boost out of that. And then toms here, same thing, just trying to kind of isolate those frequencies and boost them a bit. If we get a tommy bit coming up here, the toms are meant to kind of peek through that a lot. What we've heard so far, the toms are doing quite a lot, because even already that sounds like a pretty full, like it's over compressed and gated, but it sounds pretty full. And overheads I've kind of put almost like a high pass on here and to give you that kind of high clickier sounds and kind of really highlight the cymbals. I think that a room mic is a like really important sound in terms of mixing drums. I had to sort of find ways to deal with that. So what I've done is gotten a reverb here with a pretty high dry wet ratio and then a pretty low decay, which almost makes it sound like you're stood in the next room over, or you're kind of stood away from the kit. Blending that in is really, really nice to have. And then we've got a bigger room mic here for like more of an actual kind of reverby sound. Pretty similar thing, very wet, very low decay, just to give it more space overall. So really the main sound is coming from the room, the toms, and the overheads should give us a pretty good sound here. Yeah, sounds decent. But if you want more beef and control out of the kick, we got that going. If you want the snare to be more present, we got that going too. That extra room mics, it's just giving you that extra little bit of reverb that it's just kind of poking through and it sounds really nice. When I'm writing drums, I like to really think about how it relates to the other instruments. That's kind of part of playing appropriately and playing drums well and being like respectful to the music and being supportive. There are times for big fills, and there's one coming up soon. When I'm writing drums with electronic parts or like 909s or almost like track, what I'm playing on the drums changes quite a lot. So if we look at this bit here, so here we've got the hi-hats being played through MIDI, give it slightly more of that consistent like electronic bounce. What I'm playing is basically just kick and snare. And it's kind of weird like recording drums and hearing hi-hats that you're not playing, like it's a pretty odd thing. And you can kind of hear the push and pull of like where I'm sort of slightly going out and that hi-hat being really in time. I think that's really cool, to be honest. And then here, I wanted things to change a little bit. We'll talk in a second about how the bass kind of changes, because that really shapes this whole verse. Electronic drums become way more prominent. That's what I want you to focus on. I didn't want there to be a full like textural shift here, so that's why I've kept the kicks going, but like sampling them almost. Because the kick in that's really quiet. Same thing with that, like there's not a whole lot of kicks, so together. And I wanted this bit to be just super dancey. I think having the open hat still going there is really cool, because you've got that dancey thing going, but then the drums are following like the riff and everything. And then one thing I love doing is ending a fill like on the floor tom, so like boom, and just letting that, like, it kind of shuts it down and kind of also lets it breathe. It's a really cool, it's one of my favorite like sounds to get, I think. Space. There's a filter on the 909 here. See here. And the way that's kind of filtering out, but the reverb is kind of staying, that's really cool. Big fill, let's listen to this in context. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of talk about why this fill is here and why I wrote it and why it's chopped up like this. For the sake of doing this, this is what this initially sounded like. I'm scared. Yeah, that's not great. That's not well played. Similar kind of idea though, trying to follow that guitar riff and the melody. As I was editing the drums, I had a better fill idea in my head, but I didn't want to go and re-record it. And I had what I needed here already, so that's why I chopped it up to do this. Which is just such like that fill is so much better. It's unbelievable. There is one other big fill that I want to talk about. So let's just hear this fill on its own and try and guess where in the song this is. So that's what, a whole 2, 3, 4, a whole bar drum fill. Like in pop music, that's kind of insane. I can't tell if it's really cool and musical, or if it's the kind of thing that you're like, wow, that's a drum feature, or if you're just like, mate, why are you doing that? That's obnoxious. I don't really know. I think it's really cool, but I'm a drummer and I wrote this song, so I'm biased, I guess. It was one of those things, I was just hearing this big kind of monster fill, and you know, I didn't want to ruin the song with it. The vocals are still playing in this section, but they're not really the focal point, so that's why I kind of thought, yeah, I can get away with this. I didn't want to change the subdivision either, that's why I've left it as... If I was to go or add like a like triplets, or even trying to do like a 32nd or 16th, I can't even play it, I can't even sing that fast, so like there's no way that would fit. I think that would then become obnoxious, but I think because we're staying in that grid, we're not introducing any crazy new rhythmic ideas, we're not modulating, we're just... And then yeah, just ending with a big rock. Because even that fill on its own would work, but it's like you're building up to the fill almost with another fill, which I just think that's really cool. Let's talk about bass guitar now. So we've got 3 tracks here. My processing for bass changes slightly kind of track to track. Usually I've got at least one amp sim and then one dry channel. This is running through the TC Electronic Dark Matter, which is like a tube amp kind of distortion. When you separate the sort of low and the high parts of the bass, you have a lot more control over both sides of it. The low subby bass is sidechained to the kick, whereas the higher one is not. And then here we've got this actually kind of getting a reamp, so we've got a channel EQ, a compressor, we've got an amp, a cab, reverb, and an EQ. That's the main actual kind of bassline bass sound that we're hearing, and then we kind of just bring in these other 2 accentuate things. So we want a bit more low end, we got a bit more high end, so now we've got this nice warm bass sound that we can blend with other things and still has enough clarity in it. Same thing if we listen to just bass and drums. There's some cool stuff happening in verse 2. Yeah, I got really into using like flanges and choruses on this album. I've not really spent much time messing with mod pedals and tones and stuff like that before. Look at this bass group here, which is just for these. I've got a glue compressor, which is doing most of the heavy lifting, and an EQ, and then we've got an ensemble, an EQ, and a saturator. So that's what's giving it this sound. This effect rack is actually automated to turn off and on in this verse 2 part, so it's actually on for the entire verse. I wanted this to be like a dance verse, essentially. After that first chorus, I just wanted a different way to get into the second verse. Right out of the first chorus, it could have just gone like that, but I wanted to make this verse interesting, basically. This is the only time that bass line actually comes into this song. This bit, I wanted to replicate like the synth at the start, and we'll talk about the synth in just a second. So I wanted it to just be playing the exact same thing, and I didn't want to re-record it, so this one's actually pitch shifted. That's pitch shifted as well. A lot of the bass stuff I had the ideas for production wise way after I actually recorded it, so that's why some of this is all choppy. Like, if we listen to this with the synth here, I bet this is gonna sound pretty sick. When it comes to like bass and synth and writing those together and how they sort of layer up, I thought it was a fun idea to just have the bass kind of playing around so much in this section. When we get to the chorus, Actually, the bass line in the chorus is pretty cool. Could have just been doing like root notes going da, 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 da. But I thought adding some sort of runs and fifths in there was a nice way of spicing it up. We've got this mono synth down at the bottom here that's effectively doubling the bass line kind of the entire way through. I wanted the synth track to be super dry, just giving it almost a bit of that like kind of like retro game vibe. Obnoxiously like, this is a synth. One of my favorite parts of the synth is obviously it kind of starts with it like this. That's playing that part, which is just the melody. There's like no processing on this. I just tried to get the best sound I could out of the monologue. If you want this, then get a monologue. In the bridge here, there's like kind of 3 different parts to this bridge. It's really long. There's a bit here where the synth kind of drones out while the bass fades. Bass is playing its power chord. And again, it's just like a cool textural thing that's a bit different than any other sound I can get. And then when the bass comes in here, we start to kind of build the synth up a little bit too. It's pretty tricky trying to get the synth and bass to really sit together in parts like that. The problem of low-end mud just gets so much harder to deal with. It's why I've made this bass sound so clicky and picky, because it lets the monologue kind of breathe underneath it too. So other synthy stuff, let's get into that now. So we've got 4 different synth tracks here. This one is the kind of main melodic sound that we're hearing that kind of peaks through everything else. And then this one is kind of a mixture of both. You've got that almost kind of weird LFO thing going on with the pitch together. If you add that in, you've got this nice attack and decay, and you've got this cool kind of reverb tails. And so then I've got this track here, which is audio. The rest of this is just MIDI. But if you play that with this, it gives you this sort of like ethereal space and stuff, which is really nice, I think. How I got the sound was I just soloed these 3 synth tracks, resampled it in Ableton, and then put a big reverb on it. So if you take the reverb off, you can tell that it's basically just that dry sound, those 3 synths. But adding this, I thought there was more distortion and stuff going on here, to be honest. This is another one of those songs of mine where the synth is very much sort of supporting the guitar riff. So if we got the lead guitar with this as well. The lead is playing something slightly different. None of this has anything to do with the actual vocal melodies. There's quite a lot of information here. That's part of why I've not added this in until the second half of the chorus. All you're thinking about is the vocals, right? And that's where your focus should be. Then we get to this part. It just gives it this really nice lift that you're like, the energy just comes up. And I think it works really well too, because we're also introduced to this so early on. Let's get this going. It's kind of silly video gamey intro, but that melody's not new, so we're not chucking new things at you. The chorus saying, here's new ideas to listen to, focus on this, focus on this. Yeah, I think the synth really makes this. Again, when I was writing this, it wasn't going to be on this album. It was meant to be this like nothing but these vibe, and they're very synth melody heavy. That was the big influence. When I was creating this album as a whole, like looking at each song and saying, okay, this is very emo, this is very pop punk. Is there room for synths and other production things here that can make it more cohesive? This song kind of gave me freedom almost to put synths in other tracks and really explore that more, to a point where I think there's like only maybe 2 or 3 songs that don't have some sort of keys or synth on them on this album, because I wanted to make that like part of the overall sound of the whole thing and not just an element of this song. So yeah, in the bridge, so I've kind of just taken this a variation of this pattern here. The rhythm of it moves around a little bit, you can tell, and then here we just repeat this part, taking out this one to give it less of that main sound and become more textural again. Doing the opposite here. And then kind of the kick and the drums come in a bit more here, and the guitars start chugging a little bit heavier. And again, it then just becomes this sort of textural thing that you're not necessarily thinking about as like a melody. Although that's what I was going for here. I really like how the synth kind of interplays with the bass. It's just like there's so much going on, but it works. That's something that kind of baffles me about this song, to be honest, is like there's so much shit going on. This shouldn't like function as a song. It should be like harder to listen to than it is, but it's one of the most pop songs on the album. It makes no sense. In terms of the writing, there's some really cool stuff that happens in the bridge and the last chorus, so I want to get to that in a second, but let's just talk about some guitars first. Quickly, how I recorded all this was just through my Squier Mustang Bullet. I think it's a Bullet. I'm not actually sure if it's a Bullet or not. Yeah, it's kind of a piece of shit, but it does the job. I bought this because I moved here and didn't have flatmates who owned and played guitars, so I was like, shit, I'm gonna have to get my own one of these things and kind of work out what I'm doing with it. I recorded that through some pedals, that ran into my interface, and then I've got some kind of just basic reamping and stuff, and then some clean channels here, or dry channels, I suppose. It's interesting when it comes to talking about guitars for me, because I think so like deeply about drums. When it comes to guitar, yes, I'm still thinking about how does this play with the other instruments, and I think about it very functionally in terms of what does this do for the song as a whole, but I find it difficult actually kind of explaining individual like choices with guitar, I guess. So let's just kind of run through and see what this is playing. So it's just kind of playing this throughout most of the chorus, which, as I said, is different than the vocal melody. So there's a lot of like top line kind of stuff in this song. These are just running through some amp sims. This one's a much rockier kind of Marshall sound. That one's a bit cleaner. That one's totally clean. I like that little fade out thing there, that's cool. Just that little bend, then it cuts out. That's really cool. Yeah, there is something of a guitar solo in this. It's very much written kind of note for note based on the chords and rhythms that are already happening in the song. Yeah, so just out of the second chorus, it kind of starts building up a bit with this. It was actually initially, there was a solo kind of through this whole section here, but it was bad, first of all, and it was just very ropey and jammy. I like how this has this kind of almost proggy vibe without the, you know, not having lyrics in this section. I thought it was way cooler to just have simple ideas. So this rhythm kind of just repeats and comes like the new hook or whatever of the bridge almost. Still got these synths going on down here too. And then the band kind of builds a little bit more, but the guitar keeps doing this riff. And then there's kind of more of a solo-y thing at the end here. A lot of my guitar playing choices are like, oh, I've done the simple thing. It's like I don't have the technical skill to do like a big ripping lead, like wailer of a solo here, which I kind of tried to and it sucked. So that's why I chose to do this thing here with the build-up. There's some cool stuff here too out of the... That riff, that solo-y part kind of keeps going. The last chorus. But let's talk about that in a second, because I want to kind of explain some stuff there. Usually I record just one lead group and one rhythm guitar group. This, I've got a clean guitar rhythm group and a heavy rhythm group just to give myself more separation between them. This one's got a flanger running through an amp sim as well. Got so compressed. I'm not sure if this is... I think partially I probably ran it through a compressor pedal as well, so this whole thing is so compressed sounding. But it's kind of cool because you don't really hear that in the mix. Kind of all blends together really nicely. This one, yeah, so we've got a saturator and a phaser here. There's some cool stuff at the start, I think. Yeah, just getting that scratchy, chuggy, like, ugh, nasty. Sounds sick. That glue compressor's going crazy. Part of the other reason why I didn't want to just have like a rhythm guitar that I put a distortion pedal onto, when we get to the chorus, that's actually thicker because you're adding that in as well. But at the start, in your head like black and white, I wanted to just keep it super small and tight. We got the cleans doing the scratchy thing here too. The drums are kind of highlighting that too. And then when we get to this build-up, the snare is kind of accentuating that too, with, and then when you add this too. Sounds really cool. Should we play the game of trying to work out what pedals I used? I think that's the dark matter. Shooting your guitar, bro. That's gotta be a Big Muff or something. Big Muff. Dark Matter, I think. To get your sort of big wall of sound. And then these two DIs kind of clean it up a little bit more. That little doo-doo, it's so nice. I don't know how, like what that is, but it's very cool. This is not intentional. That's so funny. Like, I love it. Like, I kept it in there for a reason. They kind of all fade in at different times here. So when the synth comes in, we've got this coming in. Oh, I could have done more to cut out some of that ring. Gosh. And then this one kind of fades in. So that when that hits with the drums, it's really like... It's really big. Brings it back down. I like using guitars like that as like thickeners almost to make certain parts louder or bigger. Now we can finally talk about this goddamn bridge, because from basically here to here is all bridge and there's no lyrics in this whole section. Once I added guitar and started really messing with the bridge, it kind of grew legs and became its own big thing. There was so long where I was like, man, I need to write a bridge for this. I'm not going to put the song out if the bridge isn't done. And then just kind of goes, and it just gets kind of proggy. I think it's funny, like, this part is so Biffy Clyro coded, like, and they're one of my biggest influences in every aspect of music. The drum part here is such a Biffy kind of thing. I think it's really funny how trying to write this song in the style of this other band brought out the Biffy Clyro influence in my writing. Like, I just thought that was really cool and kind of interesting. What I like about this bridge is that all the sections could go on for longer, and I know it's long already, but I could have made the whole bridge this. We just do that for 8 bars, or just that. Yeah, it was really fun kind of putting these pieces together and arranging this. So we've got our lead vocal here, which is just, we've got like a dry that's just how one here, and then a reverby, super wet. That's just how, and then like a distorted, saturated one. That's just how this. I think that sounds pretty good. I record most of my vocals like that. Oh, there's a gate on the lead vocal group. That makes sense. This group is doing the kind of response thing. Over the hill and up you go. And that's been double tracked. And the same thing, I just kind of run through like these almost as presets. This is just kind of supporting the main melody. That's just how oh, that's bad. That's just how the story goes. We've got another group here, falsetto vocals. That's just how if we just listen to all the vocals together here. How the story goes. Over the hill and up you go. I think this one really benefits from all the double tracking I've done on it. The last thing I want to talk about, that it's one of my favorite parts of this song, is your last chorus. Let's just listen to this. That's just how the story goes. That's just how the story goes. What's going on here is I've changed the chords to give it a different feeling, because I don't actually know the chords or kind of theory behind this, because I, again, wrote it so long ago. Listen to the rhythms here. It's got this like minor descending thing. Bass is playing that too. I like that bass part's so nice, actually. Shifting those last couple notes rather than going like this. I think that just gives it a really cool, different feel, and it makes the song feel like more of a journey, because you've gone through this bridge, this instrumental thing that's kind of weird. Now it's like big last chorus, things are changing, you know? I can't believe there's no halftime in this song. This might be the only song, well. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, this lead guitar keeps going over this. Monologue's doing its thing too. Sounds like a stylophone, that's sick. Yeah, you can't actually hear that monologue in there. So we do one round of the chorus, and then we do this obnoxious drum fill. We get through that, and now kind of rewarded with a big major double chorus finally. It has all the lead guitar, it has everything going on, it's got the synth melody that comes back in. That's just how the story goes. Over the hill and up you go. And then you want it to get stuck in people's heads, so we do it again. That's just how the story goes. And then there's kind of a cool build-up-y thing at the end of this, actually. That's just how the story The next track starts with this like filter thing, so I thought that was a cool way to kind of transition out of this. Initially, this just had like a 30-second long guitar fade out that every other track on this album also had, so I was like, no, we're doing something else. Like, we've had enough big fade outs, and there's still quite a few, but that's enough. I'm always trying to like make musical changes and do like musician-y things that's like find all those balances between, okay, am I making this for me or am I making this for someone else, and does it matter? Like, who cares? Even if I am putting it out, then like trying to do it with intent. Yeah, it was tricky trying to make it poppy enough without derailing it, and I still wanted it to be like a rock song, you know? I think that's everything I wanted to talk about with this. I really appreciate you watching if you stayed for the whole thing. These are a lot of fun to talk about. I really like kind of digging into these and explaining my process and how I got here. It just kind of makes me reevaluate a lot of the stuff that I'm doing and makes me question why, and having to kind of explain it and justify it makes me more aware of my choices and why I make them, and I really like that because that's how I can kind of grow, you know? If there's any real producers or musicians or people who actually do this properly for a living, part of why I'm making these videos is to hopefully get people to kind of give me some feedback on how I can maybe do this stuff better. So if you have any ideas, then please let me know. Like, I'd really love to hear that stuff. I've got a full playlist on YouTube of these kind of Ableton session breakdowns, going through every track on the album and kind of doing this, explaining why I wrote it, how I recorded it. I like this format a lot. It's really fun to make these. If you've enjoyed this, then please go check out those videos. I've also got some playthrough videos where I'm just sort of playing along to these songs on the drums and doing a bit of explaining behind those as well. Yeah, the album is out everywhere. The song is called How the Story Goes. If you want to check it out, please do. It should be available wherever you find music. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will hopefully see you soon.